Hello, how's it going, friends? How are you? I'm El Documentalista, and the person I have in front of me, you weren't expecting it. Well, maybe because of the title of the video, but I know that many of you know him. I know that if you are fans of the whole phenomenon, ufological, this interview, you're going to like it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Yohanan. Are you?
Thank you for inviting me to your space. Greetings to everyone watching. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Name, the pleasure is mine. Honestly, thank you so much for welcoming me into your home. We're in your house, for letting me use your facilities. So beautiful. And well then, I want to talk to you about the current topic that surely many of you know about and are tempted and want me to ask Yohanan. And it's about the very famous 3 and
a super song that has gone viral, a song that's getting a lot of attention, a song that we need to reflect on deeply, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, well, that's a comet. Interstellar, a comet that is said to be 10 billion years old. Just to give you an idea, our solar system is 4,750, 4,000 and 4,750, 4,600 million years old.
double.
Practically double. And this thing was already roaming out there in outer space. And now it's getting closer. It's come very close to our solar system. And it's an elongated comet. It's a comet that scientists have detected. And comets always, when they're close to a sun, it has the comet's head and produces a tail or trail. The thing here is that they've detected that in the head of that comet, a tail has appeared at the front. Something that had never been recorded before in the history of comets. In other words, it's an anomaly, and it's an anomalous comet in every sense, from its elongated shape to that tail that has appeared in front of the head of the comet, among many other circumstances that scientists don't understand why.
Is that why it's behaving like that and getting so much attention?
To this, we have to add the statements of a Harvard University scientist, Avila F., who claims that it would not be an ordinary comet, but rather an artificial structure that would approach Earth. In other words, extraterrestrial beings using technology to reach us and perhaps make contact with us. That's it. Broadly speaking, this last thing I just mentioned is what has attracted so much worldwide interest. That would be extraterrestrials approaching a non-human civilization that would make contact with us in the coming weeks. That's why this has attracted so much attention. That's why we see so much content on the internet because of these statements. The scientists, for their part, say, no, wait a minute, that's not how it is. And you're making all of this up.
It is.
That's practically what National Aeronautics and Space Administration has said immediately. They've said, it's not an ordinary comet like any other. It appears at the edges of the universe, so there's nothing anomalous about it. That it needs to be studied, yes. That it needs to be analyzed, yes. Especially that anomalous behavior the comet is showing. Basically, that's it. That's the comet. I didn't share the scientists' perspective or summarize their points. But I think a warning needs to be made here, and I'll tell you why, because it's
The reflection you were telling me about, if
it's a reflection. In 1997, it approached like an ordinary comet, just like any other. The comet El Boba was a comet that caught people's attention. Because from around 5:30 or 6 in the evening, depending on where in the world you were, it would appear and you could see it with the naked eye. With the naked eye, you could see the comet. There came a time when it no longer surprised us because every day, every evening, we
see it, it became normal. We
normalized it, but it was a comet we knew would stay for a while before disappearing. You could see it for 20 or 30 minutes. Did you see it? Yes, I did.
I saw it too. I remember seeing it, yes.
We all saw it. Well, it turns out that in the United States, we'll see parallels between what happened in 2019-97 and what's happening in 2025. A scientist, an astronomer, appears on a radio show announcing that behind the comet, there was an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Immediately, it became a huge scandal, a tremendous one throughout the United States and suddenly all over the world. Because just imagine, an extraterrestrial spacecraft was hiding in the tail of a comet, and that this was going to cause a tremendous problem. Because it was claimed that we were going to make contact, that now we would finally meet the extraterrestrials, and that the spacecraft was coming straight toward our planet. It drew a lot of attention, of course, and there were many people who were afraid. And that led to a person who was among the millions listening to Costa's show in the United States, deciding to inform his group, his companions, and telling them, hey, an extraterrestrial spacecraft is coming. And the leader of that group, which later became known as Heaven's Gate, 39 people who took their own lives at the Santa Fe Ranch in California in the United States because they claimed it was the sign in the sky that they had to leave this world, leave their containers, their bodies, leave them behind. And at the moment when it was closest to the earth, they would take their own lives. Automatically, they would board the ship that would take them to earthly paradise. Broadly speaking, of course, but this could happen in the following days. Repeat itself, the story. By 2025, do we have a scientist claiming that it's an extraterrestrial spacecraft? And we see on Earth that various groups of people claim to be receiving messages from extraterrestrials. They are gathering, they are preparing to see how some of them will welcome the extraterrestrials, while others are figuring out how we need to defend ourselves from the extraterrestrials that are coming. You say, wow, this is really crazy.
If I told my community about the phenomenon of Tres and Atlas, which basically there are three possibilities, but really they're endless. But the most likely ones are, first, that it's an anomalous comet and just passes by and nothing happens. Second, that it's a comet, that if it carries technology, and that we might be able to make contact, but that contact to be good, or it can be
bad. We wouldn't know that. Of course.
You, what do you think? If they're a civilization, let's suppose that an Atlas will be there with himself. Technology and extraterrestrial life, this extraterrestrial life. Do you think that it's more likely to be a kind of benign civilization or a kind of malignant civilization?
Look, first of all, we would have to determine that it is a ship. Secondly, that beings are coming, and assuming that it turns out to be a ship and beings are coming. We can't, and we don't have the means to determine whether they're good or bad. We just don't. I'm really struck by the fact that there are contactees. These are people who are in direct communication with alleged extraterrestrial beings. Some claim that they come with good intentions and want to help us. They're here so that we can reach other levels of consciousness. One and the other side are the evil extraterrestrial beings who come to enslave us, who come to do us harm, to hurt us. We don't have it now. I don't think an extraterrestrial civilization would need to disguise itself as a comet to reach our planet. All over the world, people receive messages claiming they're already here. And there have been unidentified flying object sightings not just now, but for centuries. So why would we have to wait for them to show up like that, in such a way? Majestic, in an incredible way through a comet and making all this noise? No, they're not like that. Usually they always keep a low profile. Usually they're always entities that want it that way, to raise awareness among us that they exist, but not in such a spectacular way. All that's left is for us to set off fireworks, right? But no, I don't think that Comet 3 and 3 and Atlas brings a civilization. I don't think so. And in a few days, this comet, as scientists and space agencies have already announced, in a few weeks, it's going to pass by and leave again, heading to the edges of the universe, and that's it. The question is, what will happen to those people? Those who claim that it was clearly an alien ship, that there were aliens inside, and even more, that they were already sending messages. All those people will be left, of course.
Of course. I mean, speculation always comes with any kind of event like this, right? For example, there was also a prediction made by Madame Blavatsky before she died. And she said that humanity would be contacted around these states.
That's right, yes. And now, if we add it to most of the predictions and prophecies that have been unleashed throughout history, we will also find. That's the point you just mentioned, which refers to the idea that in these times, humans would be facing their brothers from the stars. In past centuries, they wouldn't have said extraterrestrials, since the word didn't exist. It's from the 1940s and 1950s that it starts to go viral. Or was more widely used by society, but as I said back then, no. Well, when they refer to an asteroid, a burning stone, when they refer to beings or inhabitants from other planets, that's it. Inhabitants of other worlds, inhabitants of the stars. And if we put together most of the prophecies that exist for our times, some of them talk about the fall of a great asteroid in the Caribbean Sea area. And two, about the contact or the knowledge of the inhabitants of the stars, beings like us, but who live up there in the sky and are very far away. It's very curious because when you put it all together, the prophecies given by various seers throughout history with the prophecies given by extraterrestrial beings through the contactees, it's amazing what awaits us. Direct contact with extraterrestrials. But beyond that, the power that humans will have to reach other levels of consciousness, vibrational and energetic like them. Is that what you're suggesting?
If you had the opportunity to be face to face with a being from another planet, an extraterrestrial, and you could ask them a question, what would you ask, Johan?
That's a good question. I don't know. And look, since 2016 until now, I've been dedicated to following up on this topic of contactism. I've specialized in it. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I should ask. I mean, maybe a lot of people would ask about the existence of God. If they have a religion, how do they reproduce? What are they doing here? I think what I would ask them is, maybe how they see humanity's future. Because it's clear to me that if they're already here, it's because they solved all political, social, cultural, and scientific problems. They come here from their planet. That's clear to me. So certain questions would already be ruled out. But if they have technology and really know the future, I think that would be the question. What is the destiny, or what is the future of humanity? Speaking as humanity, not as a country, not as citizens of the sea, or not like
The way.
where are we headed as a planet? I think that would be my question. I don't know, but it's complicated, isn't it?
Let's see. No, of course, that's why I'm asking you. Now, to the people who are watching us right now, I want to invite you. What would you ask two people? First, if you had an extraterrestrial in front of you, and second, what would you ask Yohana? Leave those two answers in the comments. Yohana will read them and
She will answer you there. You can count on her to reply. Hey,
Yohana, regarding extraterrestrials, how do you think extraterrestrials are? I mean, do we imagine them? With a head, hands, and so on, right? But also on our planet, there are different forms of life, like octopuses and sometimes crustaceans, sometimes birds. They are forms of life that are very different, morphologically speaking, from us, right? So how do you imagine these beings could be?
look, I think you've said something key. The beings, the extraterrestrials, will be completely adapted to the needs and opportunities of their planet. How far are they from their sun? The gravity there, the size of the planet, climate issues, gravity, and so on and so forth.
Adaptation.
To their, of course, how do contactees describe it? Just like you and me. 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 eyes, a head, fair skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and very handsome. And now everyone wants to contact the Pleiadians because they say they have perfect bodies and are wonderful in every way. But that's what they say, right? What do other contactees say? That they have blue skin, that they have certain bumps on their heads. Not horns, just bumps. Very large ears. Others say they have ears that end in a point. Others have no ears at all. There are those who say they are 3 meters, 4 meters tall. And there are those who say there are some that are 10 centimeters. Imagine 10-centimeter tall extraterrestrials. There are all kinds, of all colors, all sizes, and all shapes. How do I think they are? Just like you and me? That's what I think about those who are already among us. Look, last year the Pentagon leaked information to the press about a study they had conducted with various contactees, researchers, and people from the government, from intelligence areas. They were following up on UFOs and supposed extraterrestrials. And it turns out that in their conclusions, they claimed that they were very similar to us, but that they were not extraterrestrials, that they were beings coming from other dimensions. And an intelligence agency in the United States was worried because they didn't know how to control them in case they were aggressive, in case they wanted to do something to the United States government. You know, they have this whole obsession with wanting to protect and shield their country so that no one can touch them. But they said, how are we going to protect our country if they come from other dimensions when we don't even know what that means? That's why, since the 1970s, they hired various universities and specifically different science researchers so they could understand. What are these dimensions? Could we really cross into another dimension? Or what if, while we're recording, a hand or arm appeared, something showed up without us seeing the whole body? That is only what those intelligences are interested in, what they want to appear or for us to see. From that, they discovered then that those who claimed to be extraterrestrials apparently were not extraterrestrials. They were dimensional beings, beings with superior technology who could manipulate dimensions. And they could be here, they could be in Russia, they could be in Japan, they could be in Peru in a matter of seconds.
So who are they then?
Do they live here together? So we're not alone? It could be that we're here, in this reality, and right next to us. There are many other realities, with many other beings who might be living alongside us, or we might be living alongside them.
Who are they?
That's why I always mention alleged extraterrestrials. We don't know who they are. They show up to us and say, oh yes, we come from Jupiter, we come from the Pleiades, we come from wherever you want. How can we be sure they're honest?
There's no way.
What if they're from underground? As one of the hypotheses claims, starting in the 1960s, it became known that researchers made a classification where they said, to give an answer to the unidentified flying object issue, that they have bases in the center of the Earth.
The hollow earth.
Exactly. So did they base the hollow earth theory on ancient Asian traditions? Then it came out that it was us, but from the future. That we were going back to the past to give a solution to problems we might face. But we haven't found any solution. No. First, Second World War, and all the other wars that have happened. And one of them was about dimensional beings that came from other dimensions. And the last of all those classifications was the extraterrestrial.
But now everyone calls anything strange, anything that doesn't have an explanation, extraterrestrial. Why? Why?
Well, because they can't explain it. But we really don't know if they're extraterrestrial or not.
And what if they come from the center of the Earth? Or what if they come from the future? Or what if they come from other dimensions?
There's no way to confirm that. It doesn't exist because we still haven't sat down with an extraterrestrial and questioned them. Say, tell us the truth, what's happening? That doesn't exist.
Of course, it's all speculation.
That's right, yes.
That's true. For example, look, there are many texts. You know that I specialize a bit more in Bible topics, more like your wife.
Is that so?
But there are some let's call them theories, in which it's said that there really is no past or future, but that everything is happening at the same time. But actually it is
Different?
different in different dimensions. And there's a dimension, a parallel world where you and I are the same. Everything is the same here, but you're sitting here and I'm sitting there. But the same thing is happening. So the point is, how can you go from one parallel world to another? Could you and I? Amazing. Suddenly, pass my hand here, and then suddenly my same hand comes out over here from the other side.
Side, just like in the movies. I'd freak out, man. No, just imagine, of course. Yeah. Do you think?
That's possible?
I think so. Within what's possible. Maybe it's quantum mechanics, quantum physics, or the quantum world, right? As you said, you put your hand in and it suddenly appears elsewhere and pokes your eyes. No, it can't be like that. Does it steal money? Exactly. I think so, but those are some of those scientific advances that are really, really advanced. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. What's happening with quantum computing? Everything that's already here, but not really here. Where is it? Who knows? But it generates information for you, or you can store information in that something we still don't understand, but that would already be in those computers, right? That example you gave about dimensions caught my attention. This, just to make it very clear for the people watching us, is, do you have a radio or do you have a television? And that in one device you have many frequencies? It's exactly the same as the example you just gave, where there will be many realities in the same place, but each one on its own frequency. And if you try to change your frequency, will it sound bad? Or are you going to start seeing weird? Are you going to start seeing blurry? But is that it? But how can we? What they tell us, if we refer to ancient knowledge, they are the shamans, the seers, the sorcerers who can really, through certain sacred plants, through certain rituals, touch that mind of God. To move between dimensions, to be in places that you can't necessarily be in physically, but you are still there. They move to those places, and at those moments, they touch whatever you want. And whatever they are looking for happens. And they find out and download information to provide solutions to the person in front of them or to the communities that need answers to the problems they are experiencing. That is to say, human beings really know. They have that knowledge of how to cross those dimensions. The thing is that for a long time, this information has been relegated to crazy people. People who have no education. People who don't really know what these topics actually involve. But when you realize that it's not just one group, but that it has happened throughout history, and that it's not just Mexico, but in all the cultures on planet Earth, so does that mean that human beings do know how, that they have that knowledge and have put it into practice?
What you're telling me, Yohanan, reminds me of a story about a Greek shaman. I don't remember the name. I don't remember. People in the comments will know, but this Greek shaman, there were some builders around fixing some things in Greece. And this man saw that there was a nest of snakes, that this nest of snakes was going to be destroyed by the builders. Did he decide to take the snakes? And would he take care of the snakes until all the construction was finished? And so they would survive, right? I mean, the guy was really into biology, right? So did he take care of the snakes? Then, as the days went by, the little snakes realized what he had done for them. And while this shaman was sleeping, the snakes crawled up to his ears and licked his ears. They licked both his ears and left. When this shaman woke up, he could talk to animals.
Go ahead.
He could talk to animals, but he claimed that the snakes hadn't taught him the language of animals. Not even the insects had taught him. He He said that the snakes had simply unlocked a part of him. Because we actually already have that ability, but somehow we forget it.
It got blocked.
And what these snakes did was unlock it.
Activate it. That's something, that gift. So
This Greek healer, Greek shaman started to heal people. He talked to animals, learned from them, used their advice to heal people, and became famous. I forgot the name. Sometimes I deal with so many names. Yes, of course, but people will surely mention it in the comments. That was a Greek shaman. Look at how many wonderful things are still locked and blocked in the human mind. Yes,
a lot.
do you think we could be capable, like it says in that movie with Morgan Freeman? Do you think there's still something left to unlock? Are we at 100% of our capacity, or do you think there's still more?
We're not missing much, we're missing a lot. Look, just like you gave me an example with the Greeks, I'm going to give you an example about UFOs and encounters with them. I'm going to speak to you in general terms, so I don't focus on just one case, but rather in general. So people know and understand what it involves. The encounters. There are 3 types. The contactee is that person who is constantly receiving messages from extraterrestrial beings, the one who experiences the encounter in their life. On 1 to 3 occasions, they will encounter beings who say they are not from this planet. Okay, call them whatever you want, but they're not from this planet. And the third are the kidnappings, or what are called abductions. The kidnapping is when these beings take people against their will. Okay, those are the 3 types that exist so far. In cases of encounters, the person, they say they're not interested. No UFOs, extraterrestrials, mysteries, or anything paranormal. They are completely unrelated to our topics, the ones we are so passionate about, both us and the people who watch us. They mention that at some point they come across a being completely different from us. Whether it's floating, whether it's walking, whether it comes up beside them or comes down. From an unidentified flying object light or flying saucer, however you call it. When that person is in front of that being, something happens in their mind. What if maybe the witness didn't like, and it was very hard for him to do math calculations the next day. But like that, after he lived through the experience, something was unlocked. That improved. You didn't like music and had never played an instrument the next day. You start playing and you have an excessive interest in some musical instrument. It could be the flute, drum, piano, or anything you want, and you start making music. And I'll give you an example of one that has caught my attention the most. Some people gain the ability to paint after those experiences. Impressive that they didn't know they had that possibility, but everything was awakened after that encounter, and the room. Point I found in every case I followed up on. Those people who begin to heal after the experience of the encounter. To the people. They leave something on their body, in their hands. You can see the results in those who need help. That's what happens. Something wakes up, something is released in our brain that, like you said, gets unlocked. And we have access to another reality, to other tastes, to other sensations. And this then, where does it lead us? It leads us to understand that we haven't awakened 100% of our brain capacity, our mind. From understanding that there is telepathy, that we can have astral projections, that we can move objects with our mind, that we can do an impressive number of things. That's why on the internet sometimes we find videos, or suddenly videos of people appear on social media. Wow, National Aeronautics and Space Administration is searching for this person because of what they did, whether it was simple or funny, right? But then we realize that something so simple can solve a problem, but we always make life complicated for ourselves, isn't that right? But no, I don't think we use 100% of our brain capacity. Scientists say it's like 10, 12 others say it's about 15%.
I don't know how much, but we really are missing something, aren't we? I think a superior mind wouldn't have to use its capacity to destroy others, right? I don't think that's how it goes, right?
Of course, I totally agree. I also think that we haven't developed, unlocked, or maximized our brain to 100%. I've also come across cases similar to what you mentioned, and even a simple fall with a blow to the head can unlock something. Yes.
Exactly. It's like your ideas shift or get rearranged.
Of course, yes, of course it happens, you know. Regarding what we were just talking about, the hollow earth, let me tell you a story. I recently I was in Guanajuato, you know. I went over there for some business. A little bit paranormal, okay? But then on the way back, I stayed in the lobby of a hotel in Leon, well, outside the Leon airport, which isn't in Leon, but it's close. And a lot of people. He found out I was there and some fans came to visit me. I welcomed them in the lobby. We talked and everything, of course. But suddenly, some of them came to tell me a story. They told me a story. And I want to tell you about it. Yes, because it has to do with the hollow earth. In Leon, there is a hill. Very emblematic of Leon. I don't remember the name, it's gone, but the story is that suddenly on this hill, there are many legends, buried treasures, ghosts, lights, fireballs, etc. But suddenly, one by one, Squad Brigade, a group of soldiers was told that they had found a cave and they had to go to that cave. They were sent, right, from the high command, go to this cave. That is on this hill, which they just discovered, right? And we need you to go in and explore and tell us what's inside. That was the order given, that's what we know. How and by whom the cave was discovered is unknown, but they were sent there. The group of soldiers enters the cave. There were about 7 soldiers, right? And they say that as they went further in, less and less light from outside entered the cave. Of course, they had lamps and they moved forward hundreds of meters. And suddenly, the soldiers began to feel that someone or something was watching them. They began to feel afraid, a fear that was perhaps irrational or primitive, of the dark, of the unknown, claustrophobia, knowing that you're buried under tons and tons of earth above you. Maybe it was that, but they kept going because they were ordered to reach the cave's bottom. They didn't reach the bottom of the cave. Before they arrived, I'm not sure how much time passed, but at some point, some beings with a reptile-like appearance, they find them. They subdue them. They take their weapons and tear them apart. They were very strong. They didn't have weapons, but they had tremendous strength. Some started to fight some gunfire, and everything turned to chaos. Everything was darkness and light flashes. Retreat, retreat, they run and get caught. We know this because one of the 7 soldiers survived. He managed to get out of the cave. And he told all of this that I'm telling you. When this soldier started to tell everything, he had a face of terror. Of total terror. The military authorities ordered the cave to be guarded, There are soldiers outside the cave guarding the cave. They took the soldier's statement, and the next day the soldier resigned from the army. He didn't want to know anything else. He didn't want to know anything else. I'm looking for him. Some people said they know him. Will get me his number and see what happens. But what do you think about the reptilians?
I mean, what do you think, huh? These are some of those amazing stories that we're going to find not only there in Guanajuato, but in many parts of the world. Beings that, because of their appearance, scare us. Beings that, because of how they look, have been directly involved with the human species for centuries. In recent years, it became very trendy for people to the most important actors, actresses, or singers on the planet, but those who are always very successful. He's a reptilian disguised as a human. Isn't the British royal family also supposed to be part of the reptilians? But look beyond that, because sometimes, well, if you keep doubting like that, you might start to wonder if maybe it's true. He's so successful because he's a reptilian, or, well, those beings are protecting him. I don't know, and I don't believe it, but what I can tell you is that different cultures in Africa, Asia, North America, Central America, South America, Oceania, and all over the world, there are references to beings like that, with 2 hands, 2 arms, the appearance of a lizard, but stocky, and that have coexisted with human beings. But, of course, very wise beings who gave knowledge to humans. And you say, but how? And do they all make reference? Either they lived in lagoons or in rivers or in caves, always the reference to those 3, not in the sea, not in the sea, no. Caves, rivers, and lagoons. Beings who had knowledge that they gave to humans so that they could become better as humans and have the minimum necessary for their civilization to advance. But above all, so that when there were problems in those communities, in those populations, they could immediately get out of all those problems. And they have always been by our side. Legends that, to this day, just like you, have told this one. I have cases in the state of Mexico, cases in the state of Michoacan, where there are stories about how these beings appear, but always to help. And you note how curious it is that for centuries the legends have mentioned those beings. But do the legends also mention that there were 2 sides, or are there 2 sides? The good ones who help, the ones I've described, and those who are bad, the ones who will always mess with you, those always waiting for you to slip up so they can hurt you, but always. Most of those legends refer to them taking children away, just like the classic stories about witches. Parents get distracted and suddenly their child is gone. That's exactly what these lizard-like beings did. Now, let's move on to recent times. What do those declassifications that the United States has made in those conferences with the union's legislators say? American Union that are lobbying right now to see whether or not they will open all the files that the United States has on the subject of UFOs and extraterrestrials. There is a report from the intelligence area of the American Union, which states that through the investigations they have conducted, from the 1960s to the present, they have found a race of beings with the shape of cats or felines. This officially, in official documents. I mean, it's not just some crazy person, a contactee or someone like that. No, but people who have investigated, who have followed up, and who have reached conclusions. Now we know this thanks to testimony from intelligence community members. They mention beings like felines, beings very similar to insects. Mantises are green and often hold their hands or little arms in a characteristic pose. There were some beings that were very similar to us, which were the ones that concerned them the most, but were there reptilian beings? You say, if that supposedly happened 3 or 4 centuries ago, if they're reporting them, it's because they know those beings are still around today. And what if it's a civilization that has existed parallel to our world, living in the depths of our planet? That's where they live, that's where they have their things. I can't say their bases, no, because they wouldn't be bases. It would be their habitat, what's normal for them, and that's where they live, reproduce, and keep things. An ancient knowledge. But is it already included in those United States intelligence reports? And what worries them are these four beings I mentioned. The felines, the mantises, the ones very similar to humans, and the reptiloids. So do they know exactly where those beings live? And why are there always references to those entities? And why are they always telling us that they bring knowledge, that they are more intelligent than humans? So, are these kinds of stories true? I can't really doubt them. Well, I do doubt them, but it's also very clear to me that there are many references worldwide. So do you think the probability is high? Yes, of course, especially with all the legends. Besides, if we add those from the United States intelligence community, why would they lie? And even more so, the people who are talking about these topics are under oath. I mean, it's not like someone from the government is telling them go and lie to them. If they catch you lying, you're done for. You destroy yourself, you ruin your entire military or intelligence career, and these are people who aren't going to mess around with that kind of statement. Isn't that exactly why they're called in? Because they know they have the necessary elements. The ethics to be able to tell the truth about what is happening inside the United States government. Regarding these topics, but there are many references to those beings. And I think that as we make people aware that the reptilians are not the ones who want to take over our planet. They are not the ones who give orders to the presidents of various countries to decide what they should or shouldn't do. Those are not the reptilians. Those beings are a civilization that has existed in parallel with human beings. Now, what I don't understand is if the United States has that knowledge, why haven't the universities gotten involved? As usual, most people, especially university authorities and often the government, don't realize it. Everyone knows they exist, but no one investigates. Or could it be that they've investigated but won't share their findings? I
think that's the most likely scenario.
I agree with you too. That's it. They're there and they've always been there.
Look, what you're saying about always, they've been there or they've been parallel, etc. I was reading a theory recently about the human being as a species. It's been scientifically proven that it has around 200,000 years of existence as Homo sapiens. Okay, we've been around for 200,000 years. Before that, we couldn't consider ourselves as sapiens. Okay, it was something, an ancestor, right? As you go further back, it continues. It's like going back more, we're going back in the evolution of the human being. That's been scientifically proven. I mean, genetically, if we come from back there and all that. But we've only been around for 200,000 years, which may sound like a lot.
But it's actually not much, but
it's not much. Now, do you know which species? With those 200,000 years we've existed, we've acquired, developed civilizations and a lot of things.
That's right.
Who has more? They had more time. The dinosaurs? If we lived 200,000 years, they lived millions of years. So who tells us that some kind of dinosaur couldn't have evolved the intelligence we now have?
Of course.
And even better, those reptilian beings come from there, who took refuge underground to protect themselves from the bigger and more powerful dinosaurs. They adopted that lifestyle. What do you think about this theory?
That it could be that, it could be that. The most recent studies by very prominent scientists would mention that there were at least 1 or 2 lanes of intelligent dinosaurs with a capacity for very high intellect, comparable to that of humans. So we're saying that, unfortunately, with what happened with this asteroid that hit, or this meteorite that struck Chicxulub, and with that came the disappearance of the great saurians or the dinosaurs. Well, we realized that a lot of that knowledge was lost there. But let's think, what if dinosaurs actually had the ability to be at some point?
Do you think
about this theory? Because what if it really happened? Many of them went to the interior of the Earth. Why? Because when this celestial object hits our world, a dust cloud rises. Within seconds, it began to cover the Earth, and within minutes, the Earth
its temperature?
started to drop. Would that be an explanation? And just that? Why are there so many mammoths and so many animals that were frozen and now they're being found whole, untouched by anything, even with food still in their stomach and in their esophagus? Could that be it? I don't know, but whatever it was, it happened in a matter of seconds. Yes, because of the number of animals they're finding. For us, they're already prehistoric animals. They're animals that have been there for I don't know how many thousands of years. But what if we go back in time? They had a chain, as you rightly mentioned, of millions of years. They were the ones who practically ruled the planet. And what if there were intelligent beings? And what if they took refuge inside and they're still there? Now, with what you mention, something comes to my mind from an initiatory novel from the late 19th century, The Future Race. In that initiatory novel, they talked about a civilization that lived inside the Earth. That in that world, instead of having white or yellow lights like the ones our civilization uses, there was a greenish hue that allowed you to see everything, everything. If you were on the surface of the Earth, the moment you accessed those underground worlds, it would emit. They didn't know if it was the stone, the ground, the ceiling, but there were large hollows, huge caves that housed an entire civilization, like a
Kind of bioluminescence?
Exactly, something like that, but once you were inside, you could see everything without any problem, everything you could see. And they claimed that those beings had an energy like some kind of wands, long before Harry Potter and all that appeared. I'm talking about the 19th century, okay? They had some kind of wands, and with those wands they could manipulate the earth, they could manipulate stones. And you could build with certain information you gave to that wand, you could modify matter. That force, Abril, those intraterrestrial beings were what Adolf Hitler searched for during many years. And this, which was called the Nerve, that government institution of the Nazi Party or of Nazi Germany, that was behind the Holy Grail, the Spear of Longinus, all the first-degree sacred relics that were near or in contact with Christ. But they also followed up on many legends, and one of them was the April Force. Because they claimed that whoever managed to control that force, April, would completely control the planet. And what does it have to do with, or at what point does it become connected to the world? With the reptilians? The thing is, what if there really was a civilization inside the Earth? And what if there really was a greenish hue? And there are references in various legends that beings with green skin came out of caves or large hollows. Not necessarily reptilian beings. It doesn't have to be a lizard standing upright. It wouldn't have to be that, but rather humanoid beings, meaning 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but with greenish skin. And we find that in many stories, in many countries, at different times in human history. So, would we be able to consider that these reptilian beings are not, I repeat, a lizard standing upright, but rather beings with skin that has a greenish tone?
Of course, it could be possible since, for example, the color of our skin is given to us by the sun.
That's right.
The less sun you get, the whiter you are, right? Yes.
Yeah, completely pale. Uh-huh.
But it could even be human beings can't live without sunlight.
Is that so? Yes, because it's a separate vitamin.
Vitamin D. Vitamin D breaks down with the sun's ultraviolet rays. You need sunlight. So, what would happen if we suddenly lack that vitamin D that the sun gives us? If melatonin doesn't go through its proper process and the pigmentation of the skin doesn't happen the right way. It might take on another color.
Of course, absolutely. Now,
Way.
characteristics and what qualities would that greenish luminescence have that allows? Because the legend or novel mentions that there are plants and they are completely green. It's the process of photosynthesis. They managed to do it inside the earth. But it's all thanks to that luminescence that's produced by a kind of little sun that would be inside and in the middle of those big cavities. So we would be talking about a technology, something that someone made, that someone processed, and that performs the functions, both on the skin and on the plants. Or,
I mean, basically what you're telling me is that it is, we have ultraviolet lamps exactly that we use to keep plants indoors. Maybe they could have developed a kind of tiny sun.
that's right, China is experimenting with those suns so that at night there is this light for the citizens. Why not think that in the past civilizations went to the interior of the earth? Did they also already know that information, that they had that technology? I think we shouldn't rule anything out. Because especially when legends talk to us about those lights, well, in Mexico, how many times? Especially on the night of San Juan? They say green, yellow, and red lights appear, and you wonder about that light. How does it happen? Is it some kind of gas? Some mineral that's nearby, that's inside? Or could it really be those glimpses of reality, of those underground worlds? We can't rule out any possibility.
No, the possibilities are endless. Thermal energy through lava, volcanoes, and all that. It's just that
It's amazing that
that's for another episode.
it's just that when you start thinking about everything, wow, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. No. We'd have material for a long time.
That's right. But to finish, what did Abril do for you about the Force? It's an energy that ensures that coming-of-age novel from the late 19th century. Whoever possesses it or understands how it works has access to anything they desire. Because of that, the modification it can make to matter. And how curious that Hitler and his closest inner circle, who are said to have been esotericists, sorcerers, highly elevated occultists with very advanced knowledge, were behind it. And that they invested large amounts of money to be able to find that information. Which is good that they didn't find it, because otherwise things would have, well, we wouldn't be recording this.
They knew something, which is why they started investigating.
That's right, yes, of course. And the references are there. Much of the initiatory knowledge from the 19th century, which we have to remember, is the century, I believe. More important about alchemy, about this forbidden knowledge, spiritism, contact with those other realities. That's what much of it we still talk about today. These are topics that have generated a lot of interest. And I believe that as people get to know, investigate, and study these phenomena or events, I'm sure we're going to find a lot of amazing information that we can use in the future. Surely.
Totally agree, and I hope so, that it happens to us in this life. Hey, Yohanan. To wrap up, the last question.
Tell me, what's your type?
Which alien is your favorite?
Which one is yours?
Of alien?
Those, I think it would be them, because they're constantly helping humans. And I'll give you an example. Starting in February 2019, they invited me to open the tourist route of the Zone of Silence. On the Coahuila side, we always enter through the municipality of Francisco Ponce Madero in the state of Coahuila. I started listening to the locals, because even though there are large stretches of desert, there are people who live inside the desert. So they tell me that sometimes when they have problems, like they run out of gas, water, or have other issues, they see things. Some adult individuals appear with long white beards, dressed in white robes. And those beings help them and solve the problems they have at that moment. Who are these beings? If we look at the ancient traditions of Asia, they refer to beings dressed in white, with white robes, with a kind of footwear, like sandals. But that footwear, when people look at their feet, is not touching the ground? It would be somewhat separated from the ground, but they pretend to be walking, I imagine, so that we don't get scared or frightened, of course. These stories keep repeating in the desert and the zone of silence even today. There are people who tell you, I had a problem. My car broke down in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly, out of nowhere, a man appeared and told me which way I needed to go. Journalists and researchers on the subject of UFOs from the 1970s. When they entered the zone of silence and didn't have a guide, they were lost. And they started going around the same hill. Suddenly, on one side of the hill, one or two of these figures would appear. What are they doing? Who are they? Where do they live? We don't know, but the stories have been around since the 1970s. If you ask the locals, they'll say, oh, it happened recently. Last week we saw one of these beings dressed in white. Sometimes they see them picking up stones, little plants, or it seems like they're picking up insects from the desert. They put them on some white platforms. White platforms can't go into the desert. When we've taken tourists, when we go camping, we don't take the trucks in. Because you arrive, you park the truck, maybe trucks for 24 people or 17 people, and after half an hour it starts to sink, the ground isn't stable, they start to sink in. And to get a truck out, if it sinks halfway up the tires, it's going to be a hassle. You can't do it because of the type of sand that's in the desert. So how can you explain then that the locals say that? There was like a kind of trailer, a box trailer, which is basically just the whole platform of that box. They place stones as if planting small plants. How? Who are they? Are they conducting a study? It's clear they are. Those beings dressed in white are looking after the communities, making sure they don't lack anything. But yes, on some occasions, on some nights, those beings dressed in white come close to the houses to ask for water. And people know them as the thirsty ones. What is that? If they see them during the day, they are adults, always men, not women. If they see them at night, they are young, dressed in white or with that white robe. Stocky, as if they exercised a lot, and they speak to them in Spanish, asking them for water, a glass of water, and the people from the interior of the desert know that they can't deny them the glass of water because they know who they are, the ones who are going to help them in case they need something, if they need any help. But the stories mention that if they see them at dawn, they're children. Children between 10 and 12 years old, and they can be boys, men, or they can be girls, women. What are we dealing with? Are we dealing with an underground civilization? Maybe if we go back to that theory of underground worlds, are we then going back to the idea that there's a base? That they live inside the desert? What did they find? Large cavities, from what we've been talking about, and that their civilization is down there and sometimes they come up? For something? To look for something? To look for maybe some element that could be useful to them for something in their civilization? I'm not sure, but I just mentioned the zone of silence on the Durango side. We found it in the jungle of South America. Those beings dressed in white that suddenly appear when people got lost in the middle of nowhere or in the middle of all that undergrowth in the jungle. And they tell them, go this way, go that way, take that path, stay here, don't move anymore. Tomorrow, you begin walking toward that place with the first kinks of the sun. You say, how curious that they appear in the desert, that they appear in the jungle. And the most amazing thing is that those beings have been sighted with the same characteristics in the high mountains. Without any kind of protection for the temperatures that occur in those places, but they also don't have any protection when they're in temperatures above 42 degrees. In the desert or in places as humid as the jungle, they also don't have any kind of protection.
And it seems like insects don't touch them, that insects don't even notice they're there. Those beings there, so beings that are there helping us. It's very clear to me, at all times they are watching over us. Beings that sometimes, when there is going to be an armed conflict, they come to humans and tell us, go, don't go to war. Stay in love, in peace, in unity. And how curious that those three words I just mentioned are what most religions have told us throughout history. So, are we talking about the same thing then? Are we in a position to say that everything happening within the case studies of these beings, it's one that knows about the future because they give us warnings about what will happen in the days to come? Could it be that they are entities that, like the reptilian beings we've been talking about, come in a parallel way or live on the planet with us? Or could it be about the ancient gods who descended at some point and some of them never returned to their place of origin? According to the legends, they went and started living inside the earth so that no one could steal the secret and the information they possessed. I don't know, but there it is. And that's what fascinates me, of course.
Just imagine discovering a being, living with them.
Look, in Asia there are legends of Agartha, of Shambhala, and of the beings dressed in white who are peace, who are love, who are knowledge. Over there it's seen as completely normal and natural, but not in America. It scares us. Now we have no idea who they are or what they want. But there are legends and stories. That's why every time I travel somewhere and come across these stories, I try to document them, to interview the people who have the knowledge. And I've found a tremendous parallel in what is South America, Central America, and North America. It might seem like these are completely unrelated stories, but that's not the case. That's not the case in Chile. In the desert area, they also see, and there are sightings of beings dressed in white. How is it in the desert? All the way at the bottom of the American continent. Well, there are the stories, there are the witnesses, there are the people who talk about that, and then you come to North America and you find the same stories. What could they be? Beings that can travel from dimension to dimension and are here? Or could it be a great civilization that is spread all over the planet? I believe that more, that it's so spread out. They have extensive knowledge and help as much as possible within what we permit. Because human beings don't always allow themselves to be helped by those beings from those other realities.
A complete mystery.
That's right.
And again, hopefully we get to experience discovering it. I
hope so, I really do. And that we don't just stay with the legends, with the stories, but also that you, me, and everyone watching us can take part and witness the presence of these beings, of those entities that seem to be watching over us very closely.
Well, there you have it, friends. I told you that you were going to like this episode, didn't I? Friends, I loved it. Ooh, there's still a lot left, a lot to talk about, isn't there? Huh? If you would like a second interview with Yohanan, let me know in the comments. Yohanan, is there anything you want to say to the people at the end?
Yes, if you liked any of these topics, read, study, analyze, but above all, question. I think the best thing for 2025 is that information is now more available through the internet, through podcasts like yours, which have a lot of information. And that's very good because it helps us think, it helps us look for information. I want to learn more about what you just mentioned. So the best thing is for you to read, to study, to analyze, and then with all that cultural background you can gather, draw your own conclusions so that you understand that these topics are like this, they have a mystery, there is something hidden, and we can be participants in all that knowledge. So that's the invitation I extend to all your audience.
There you have it, friends. Remember that behind every myth, there's always some truth. And if you've made it this far, does that mean you like the episode? But above all, it means you're a great follower. And I encourage you to prove it by leaving the hashtag Yohanan in the comments. That way, I'll know you made it to the end of the video, and I'll probably leave a comment on yours as well. Alright? Ladies and gentlemen, I am El Documentalista, and this was interview with Yohanan. Thank you and see you next time.